Now, what happened to Dave Frasca after 9/11? He got promoted. Okay. Remember that first elephant with the 9/11 across its butt? That's 9/11. Now, there's other elephants coming at us now in the wake of 9/11. But if you read Crossing the Rubicon, you get how these guys work and how they think. I started the first part of the book with detailed emphasis on what? Economics. Did I not? How many people here read the book? Because you've got to understand how money works. Unless and until you change the way money works, you will change nothing. And of course, it may be too late for that anyway. If you were to take a dollar bill out of your wallet and hold it in your hand, and a little glass of crude oil in the other hand. Now, what does the dollar bill represent? If you distill it down, it represents the ability to do something, right? To do work. To buy gasoline for your car, to drive your car, to buy a house, to take an airplane ticket, to buy food, to whatever. It represents oil is the ability to do work. Money has no value without oil. Von Clausewitz, who said, talked about the fog of war, said that war is a continuation of politics by other means. If he was right about that, then politics is a continuation of economics by other means. And economics is a continuation of energy by other means. You keep looking for the root of the root of the root. We come back to oil. All oil production always follows a bell curve. This is one field. And, let's say, back Giant, the movie Giant with Montgomery Clift. Was it Montgomery Clift? And Elizabeth Taylor and whoever. James Dean. Okay. So they drill a well, and the guys are getting showered in the oil and we're rich. Well, that's what happens when you drill this first well. It's all under pressure. Now, reservoirs are not like a glass because it's sedimentary rock, and it's source rock, and sometimes it's more porous and less porous, and there's all kinds of geologic factors that come into play, but the pressure goes down, but you drill more wells and your production goes up, and eventually the level goes down and you pass this peak and you come down. And that applies whether it's an oil field, the oil in one country, or the oil on planet Earth. The model is the same. Oil discoveries peaked in 1962. We now use 4.2 something barrels of oil for every new barrel of oil that is found, and that the gap is getting bigger every year. In 2003, there was not a single discovery of a megafield. Now, megafield sounds big, doesn't it, right? Mega, big, right? Like Schwarzenegger, megafield. 500 million barrels in a megafield, right? The world uses 1 billion barrels of oil every 11.5 days. In 2003, we didn't find a single field with 500 million barrels. That's a clue. Oil discoveries are way off. So there was a great prophetic scientist by the name of M. King Hubbert who predicted way back in the 50s that the peak of U.S. oil production would come in 1950. They damn near burned him at the stake. I know, I've been close to that a couple of times. But you know what? He was right. So he used the same model to predict a world oil peak somewhere between 2000 and 2010, 2012, based upon consumption. Now, these are creaming curves here, which show actual use. This was the predicted model curve, which shows a peak just shortly after here. But you can see that the creaming curves are all skewed this way. This is hydrocarbon production. This is world population. This is hydrocarbon production per capita. And hydrocarbon production per capita actually peaked on planet Earth in 1979. But notice what happens here, which is what all the ecologists like my dear friend Richard Heinberg and all the great writers who have talked about peak oil calls overshoot. Where the population and the demand overshoot the ability to produce and sustain the population. This is the model that is applying to world events right now. From the Wilderness, my newsletter has been active on peak oil since right after 9/11. I have an incredible science editor, Dale Allen Pfeiffer, who was a geologist, who has done some of the most amazing prophetic writing. He has been right so far ahead of the curve. I mean, and I'll show you some examples later on. But finally, on October 1 of last year, when I say we did it, I don't mean from the Wilderness, because there are a great many people who were there on peak oil before I was. Colin Campbell, Richard Duncan, Walter Youngquist from Eugene, Oregon, Kenneth DeFays, many other people active in many, many groups around the world. But we did it because, on October 1st, the G7 group of nations issued a joint statement saying we have no idea how much oil is really left. And we need to find out. Now that was after Shell had downgraded its reserves 3 times in 1 year. Now, let me talk briefly about reserves before we move on. Oil companies trade their stock on Wall Street. They raise money that way. If I'm BP Amoco and I discover a field with 600 million barrels of oil, and I announce that all in 1 year, I have to pay taxes on 600 million barrels of oil all in 1 year. Do I want to do that? No. So I say I found 100 million barrels this year, 100 million barrels this year, 100 million barrels this year, and that gives the false illusion from an accounting standpoint that more oil is being discovered in old fields. It's pure accounting hodgepodge. It's hocus pocus. Secondly, the more oil that I state, there are many different levels of reserves. There's proven reserves, there's estimated reserves, ultimately recoverable reserves, all of which are accounting terms. And we even found that Dale Pfeiffer was digging through a report from the Energy Information Administration about reserves that it says are in the ground. And there was a little footnote. You got to read the footnote sometimes. It's a pain in the ass, but it really pays off. Because the footnote said the Energy Information Administration adjusts estimated reserves based upon anticipated demand. What? Huh? Anybody see this last June? All right, let me plant a thought in your mind before we go on here. I get asked this question more often than any other question. And what it reflects to me is not so much ignorance as the fact that you, like me, like every victim out here who has been conditioned by television and radio and National Public Radio and, all of this mind control that's out there, we have been conditioned not to think critically. And probably the single most important question I'm asked, the single most frequent question I'm asked is, hey, Mike, now you can fill in the blank anything you want to. What if the aliens come tomorrow with this whole great new technology? We'll be saved. Okay. Or what about hydrogen? Hydrogen is an insult, a chimera of the most evil kind. Okay. What about zero-point energy? Been demonstrated in the laboratory. Now, so let's assume that tomorrow there's a brand new technology. Will that brand new technology work in your 1996 Toyota Tercel? No. There are 700 million internal combustion powered vehicles on planet Earth. Each one of those vehicles, according to a couple studies we found, takes on the average between 12 and 15% of all the oil it will ever use in its lifetime just to make. Who had it? All right, I love you. Would you like a cigarette? You read this article here. You've got to make 700 million new vehicles, and that article alone tells you there are 7 gallons of oil in every tire.